All right. So the first one is from Fred. He says, how do you deal with clients wanting to pause every few months for SEO? I offer monthly campaigns for clients, but they are month to month with cancellation anytime with 1 month notice in advance. However, I am noticing some clients are asking constantly every 2 to 3 months to pause for the month, which is putting me behind SEO work and slowing down the results for their campaign. How would you deal with this? And is there a better way you would suggest to what I have in place? Yeah, I deal with that similarly with tree service contractors every year, because tree service industry in most of the locations that I manage clients or lead gen assets it's seasonal, fairly seasonal. There's still a little bit of tree work that happens during the winter, but not much. So it's usually it's a pretty seasonal business, that, it's heaviest in the summer, but it starts to ramp up in the spring and it slows down in the fall, right? So it's really only in the winter that it's really slow. And so I get a lot of tree service contractors, about 60% of them every freaking year. I land a bunch of new clients in the springtime, which is what April 1st is the date that I always start ramping up prospecting for my tree service agency, my tree service SEO agency. And so we're in that process right now. I'm starting to ramp up prospecting for my agency this year, for the busy season. And what happens is we do SEO work for them until about November. And then usually in November, we start getting requests from tree service contractors to pause their SEO subscription or services until spring. And I hear that all the time. Like, hey, I'm just going to pause over the winter months. I'll be back in the spring. But what happens is oftentimes in the spring, they are still ranking. So I've learned over the years to take certain steps when doing SEO work now for tree service contractors that keeps a lot more of the control in my hands. So for example, I use my directory site as a primary tier 1 asset and things like that, so I can control the link flow. So I do a lot of link building to the directory page and to other assets and things like that. And if they want to cancel or pause, then, there's things that can kind of, I can reclaim some of the work that I've done in a way that, encourages them to come back. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes they still will remain ranking months later, so they don't come back in the spring. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do come back, and typically it's when they start to slip because, so sometimes that's within a few months, but sometimes it'll be later on that following year. I'll get a call or an email, or a text or something, and saying like, hey, man, I'm ready to start SEO services again. So what do I do at that point? Well, my pricing has gone up. Why? Because I've got more clients now since the last time that you were a subscriber. And so the demand is higher, supply and demand. There's more demand, less supply. Therefore, my prices have gone up. That will stop those people from canceling every so often very quickly, right? Point that I'm trying to make here is if you got a client, you say you have a couple of clients or a few clients that are canceling every few months for a month, tell them that's unacceptable. Like, number one, you can do it on a case-by-case basis. If there's a valid reason that somebody needs to cancel for a month or two, then, you can always extend that to them, right? Say, yeah, of course, no problem. Like hardships, for example, things like that. That's not a problem. But if you've got somebody that just arbitrarily wants to pause for a month here and a month there and does that every few months, like you're mentioning in your question, then that is a pattern, right? That's a behavior pattern that is going to continue. It's going to persist. So therefore, you have to put some sort of process in place to prevent that from happening. So that's why I would say to them, okay, listen, you can pause it, but because of right now things are growing for my agency, and I'm going to have to raise my prices. So when you come back, your price is likely going to be increased by 10% on a monthly retainer, or 20%, or whatever it is. That will very quickly encourage them to stop this start and stop shit. Or you could just flat out say like, hey, listen, I give everybody the opportunity if they need to pause for a month or two. I'll give everybody one opportunity, right? But after that, if you do it repeatedly, then I'm sorry, we're just going to have to end our engagement with each other, because it's not an efficient way for me to run SEO campaigns, right? So there's a number of ways you can address it, but the point that I'm trying to make is those are pain in the ass types of clients. And the problem is you set a precedence when you allow something like that to happen. You have to treat your time like an attorney does, right? it's, and I understand, like I've got a salesperson that's we recently hired. He's doing great. And he wants to be really helpful with, so, he'll jump on a call with people and basically give out free consultation. And I have to kind of rein him in sometimes. And he's new. He's just started handling calls on his own. So it's fine. What I'm saying is we all have to, it's easy for, and I talked about this, I think last week, what we call in the military, they call it mission creep. In our industry, we'd call it scope creep, right? If you give clients a little bit of wiggle room, they oftentimes take a lot, right? You give them an inch, they take a mile. And it's because it's again, scope creep. You start to allow things that weren't clearly defined in the initial scope of work to start kind of creeping in to the products or services that the service that you're providing. And so think about it like this, guys. What am I saying here? I'm saying, like, you set a precedence and you train your clients in what is acceptable from them, for what you think is what you're telling them is acceptable. Okay. So, like, if you answer a phone, after business hours, or you reply to an email after business hours or over the weekend or something. Now, if it's an emergency, guys, you can always make exceptions. That's fine. But if you start replying to emails after business hours or over the weekends, what do? You're setting a precedent to your client that they can reach you at any given time. So you're on call. Is that the type of business you want to run? I mean, are you getting, emergency call out pay for answering after hours emails or phone calls? If you're not, then why are you doing it? You see what I'm saying? Like, you got to treat your time like an attorney does. You can't ask an attorney a question without getting a 15-minute bill, right? They'll bill you in 15-minute increments, and it's often a lot. You know what I mean? So you got to kind of consider your time that way. Again, you can always make exceptions if it's warranted, but you have to think about, like, not allowing your clients to if you give them too much wiggle room, they will take advantage of it and exploit it. And next thing you know, you're doing a hell of a lot more work than you ever agreed to initially, and they're not being charged anymore. And so the same thing goes with something like this, starting and stopping campaigns. Just tell them flat out, like, that is not an efficient way to run an SEO. You're making my job harder, and I just don't want to work like that. So if you have a valid reason for pausing, then fine, I'll give you a chance to pause for 2 months or whatever. That's fine. But after that, if they want to pause a second time, then you say, nope, I'm sorry. Or, yeah, that's fine. But when you come back, it's going to be 10% more per month, or 15% or 20% or whatever it is. You understand? Again, guys, you have to start. I know when you're hungry, when you're trying to make a dollar any which way, that you're willing to bend over backwards to get that dollar. But the problem is you set a precedence that people will take advantage of going forward. So you have to start being a little bit more disciplined in setting ground rules up front. And I think that's really important. So